Hello Propenomix people, welcome to the supplement, and this week's is called Real Data Revisited. So this is the supplement from the 8th of October 2023. As you know, I like to start off with a quote, and this week's quote is, "In God we trust, all others bring data." That's from W. Edwards Deming, an American composer and economist, which sounds like a pretty incredible combination to me. So this week my mind got very much stuck into the data, not least because I was asked to present at the Property Investor Show at the XL in London as part of a panel discussion to answer the question, landlords and property investors, is 2024 your year? I find myself at the moment regularly referring back to the supplement from the 9th of July this year, which I enticingly titled Cheapest for 20 Years. Not being a fan of clickbait, I'm too much of an intellectual snob, which definitely holds back my self-promotion ability, but that's just one of my many failings. This wasn't about technology or something else that tends to deflate as time goes on, but about the real price of property. So when I say the real price of property, I'm talking about the price of property adjusted for inflation. Now, before we get too stuck into that, I'd just like to ask anyone listening to please subscribe to the YouTube channel if they can, because that will help with the YouTube algorithms and also help me to spread the word more widely about Propenomix. Thank you. So, we do need to do the macro roundup before I get stuck back into that data from the 9th of July. I've had to lead with Liz the Lettuce and the ideological idiots supporting her this week at the Tory party conference. Unbelievably, I watched as a speech from her was enough to put 12.7 basis points on the UK 10-year gilt yield. We owe a fair touch above 2.5 trillion as a nation and an average increase of 0.127%. On that's an average effective cost of £3,175,000,000 per year. That's right, that's what the speech cost. As you can tell, my blood pressure suffered. The seemingly surely impossible chance that she could once again become leader of the Conservative Party once Rishi steps down. And of course the sharks are circling due to the impending election defeat that isn't here yet by any means, but is the betting favourite, is enough for the international markets to act in such a way. It's quite unbelievable. Even more unbelievable is that 60 idiotic ideologues would follow her over that cliff because they believe in low taxes. Precisely zero of them understand inflation. Precisely zero of them are willing to admit that these higher taxes are necessary to recoup the incredible generosity of the government, their government, remember, during the pandemic. I despise inflexible ideology on any side of the political fence, and this is a perfect example of it. Anyway, after the lettuce cost us all £46.69 per year, really, in real time, in the long run, some other noteworthy events deserve some airtime. Let's start on the house price indices, and a word as to why they look so bearish at the moment too. The Halifax, discussed later, and nationwide indices are obviously from two large UK mortgage lenders. Here's the chief problem with their data. It relies on a smallish, because the market is crowded, percentage of loans. But not just that, it depends on mortgaged buyers. Now, we don't know this for sure, as they're not transparent with their methodology. Secret source or smoke and mirrors, you tell me. But that's exactly what's collapsed this year. Mortgaged buyers, down 28%, as I pointed out some weeks back. Cash buyers are down 1%, i.e. there really is no difference there. So mortgage buyers have been crowded out simply because of the cost of debt, and the lender indices make it look worse than it is. So you would expect the nationwide and Halifax indices in a similar market to be the most bearish, reporting the largest falls. And as we check, indeed they are. The only transactional source is of course the ONS, which is totally comprehensive, but in technical terms, pigging slow. So slow that things have moved on 3 months by the time we know what it says. So much better for historical long-term comparisons, but not much use in the now. Nationwide this week reported a 0% movement for September, but 5.3% down year on year. That's probably about double the real drop based on stitching the data together, so we might reasonably expect the ONS at the end of the year to look more like a 2.7% fall. My forecast in January was 3 to 5% drop. We won't know till early March 2024, by which point we won't care and we'll have other things to worry about. The East, The South and Wales are the biggest losers according to Nationwide, which isn't distinctly different to the Zoopla data discussed a couple of weeks back. Some 30-year green gilts sold off this week, sold at a 4.93% coupon, and the 30-year yield touched 5.11% this week in what looked an absolutely phenomenal deal. If I was a pension fund trustee, I'd have been tucking into that and then taking a 29-year holiday. September's PMI numbers, Purchasing Manager Indices, which remember show the level of activity in a more real-time way, were well above their consensus, making July and August look like outliers. They were still under 50, however, the critical number, shrinking not growing, but the story remains the same. The strength or the failure to roll over in the wider economy is creditworthy and continues to outperform expectations. This all feeds the higher for longer tapestry of rates, and all means the bond yields climbed more than we would like this week, although the charmed life we lead on the 5-year bond yield continues, as it still remains the cheapest debt on the yield curve once again. Lucky us. The 2-year gilt sale this week was at nearly exactly the same number as the 30. This isn't heartening, because you might think, if you followed the story over the last few years, that a non-inverted yield curve is a good thing. Not really. Once it's been inverted for a while, the historical tendency is for it to flatten out as it approaches a recession. The battle will continue, but the fact that higher bond yield lead to more bond sales, which then lead to higher bond yields, is still a problem, just as it was in the immediate aftermath of the kamikaze budget. Firepower is what's needed right now, as there are some deals there in the bond markets in my view. Halifax released their index on Friday morning and printed a minus 0.4% for the month and minus 4.7% year on year. The BBA mortgage rate, and that's the average rate that the banks are charging on variable rate, went from 7.85%, ouch, to 7.93%. Please, no more. We are not far off some accusations of price gouging, since yields look better in September than they did in August. But of course the lender's attitude is, well, if people are paying, rates go up on the day and down after 3 weeks, if not 6 weeks after a bit of calm. Just like the petrol station, when oil goes up versus when it goes down. So it wasn't the busiest week on the macro front, but the news continues to look bearish for the interest rate. The economy chugs on, the house prices hold static even on mortgage properties, although you'd have expected that because September normally means a pickup in activity. But the rates weren't looking that attractive for most of September and have only recently dropped below 5% for the owner-occupiers. Back to the data and the cheapest for 20 years. The conclusions from the 9th of July piece are worth reiterating. Firstly, the largest ever average real inflation-adjusted house price in the UK has ever faced is £333,679. Now this is all done in 2023 Q2 pounds. The time when that house price was valid was Q3 2007. To put this into context, it took until Q2 2021 to hit over 300,000 real average again after prices declined in the global financial crisis. But also, inflation did what it does quietly in the background. Real house prices in Q2 this year, that's our most recent quarter available for analysis, but we're only a couple of weeks away from being able to replicate that analysis. For Q3, we're back down to £261,995. This, of course, was at least as much about inflation as it is about nominal prices being lower than they were in Q2 2021, which of course they aren't. That's the power of significantly inflationary times. 261,995 was the lowest real house price the UK had seen for nearly 10 years. You have to go back to Q4 2013 before it goes below that. The Q1 2013 real bottom was 247,354. And a couple more flat quarters and some more 4 to 5% inflation, and we aren't that low yet, remember, will soon get us there or underneath that. That's the same real house price as 2002. And you'll recall what happened between 2002 and 2007, although badly underwritten credit was the bloating factor there. The analysis needed to, and did, go deeper. Using the ONS AWE, which is the average weekly earnings index, we can look at multiples of salary that a great deal of the whinging that goes on in the media seems to focus on. So we can also adjust for inflation and look at real wages. I think real in this context is one of the best words in the English language. 1980 was a post-winter of discontent year where the early days of monetarist economics started to take hold via the Thatcher government. It was the start of a cycle where house prices trebled within the decade. I can hear the gurus getting excited from here. So I've cherry-picked the start of a boom, not a peak. In 1980, the real average weekly earnings was £259.03, making an annual salary in 2015 real terms of £13,469.56. The real figures at the ONS use the 2015 inflation CPI to gauge the real prices. The real house price of £130,218 was therefore 9.67 times the real average salary. And remember, the nominal house price at the time was £20,857 on average. In 1989, the real average weekly earnings had moved forward to £350.72, which was an epic growth of 35.4% in 9 years. Annualised, this moved up to £18,237.44. The real house price of £203,122 was now 11.14 times average salary. A movement upwards, unwelcome perhaps, but nothing like the nominal tail of the tape that showed 191% increase in house prices. In plain English, houses got less affordable, but an awful lot less affordable than it looks. 15% less affordable. Not great, but again we're cherry picking a peak in the market there and comparing it to a nadir. By 1995, with a combination of a sustained slump in prices and a massive increase in average wages, we were down to 6.4 times earnings in real terms. Supremely affordable and good work from John Major, you'd suggest. Of course, it isn't realistic to pick the nut low, nor would you want to replicate the economic conditions of the early 1990s, as close as we might be to that period, unemployment being the singular gigantic difference between then and now. In 2007, at peaky McPeak face for the real pricing, the multiple was back to 12.3. Anyway, where are we today? Or where were we in Q2 2023? 9.96 times. Very, very close to 1980. The realists among us know that conditions of the 1980s, huge gains in salary in real terms, are unlikely. However, the best guess from here is a flat market in the next 12 months, plus or minus a bit. And Rick's surveyors are very much saying minus, where the best guess for inflation over the next 12 months would be a 4 to 5% average, with minimum wage already enshrined for April at 5.5% up. That is only going to improve the multiple for buyers, although we can see just how low it can go in certain conditions. What's the real point I'm making here? That when we look over a 10 plus year time horizon, as we always should in property or any investment frankly, things don't look like the media frenzy around house prices and income multiples. Houses are not historically expensive right now, although they're not outrageously cheap either. There's huge scope for major gains in the upcoming 5 to 10 year period. When exactly? I can hear you asking. Well, you know that's a fool's errand. Time for a bit of Uncle Warren. What would he say here? Time in the market, not timing the market. I couldn't go back to July's magnum opus without mentioning the rest of my analysis, which focused on rents. Bristol rent is up 71% in 5 years, we hear. Rents are up nearly 25% in 2 years. The horror. The greedy landlords. Of course, maintenance is up 50%. Interest rates are up 100%, and insurance is up 70%. But never mind that, you're just supposed to suck it up. Here's where I got to on my rental real deep dive. Since January 05, rents were up 46.5% across England, as of May 2023. Why 2005? Because that's the first year that the ONS have statistics for. Average weekly earnings, even if we just use the nominal figure, are up 71.6% in the same period. We can apply the inflation rate in the interim period to those figures. It's about 68.1%, and if we do, we see that rents are cheaper in real terms. Every £100 of rent paid in January 2005 is equivalent to £87.15 in rent in May 2023, whereas wages have just about kept pace. £100 wages in January 05 is £102.08 in today's money. Following this logic on, rent is about 85% of the burden that it was to tenants in January 05. I hope you'll agree with me that this is really unbelievable, but it just shows you why you need to be so very careful with the media. In this case, particularly the left-wing media. In any time of inflation, you are absolutely guaranteed a near infinite stream of headlines. It is like Donald Trump being elected president, because in nominal terms, nearly everything will hit an all-time high. To quote the Donald, which is not a habit I seek to pick up, this is fake news of the very highest order. The pension triple lock means that pensions are up 8.5% next April, which will be more than the average inflation versus April 2023 by the time we get there. Other benefits payments will have a similar fate, although LHA is still likely to be frozen as the system breaks that little bit more. The lesson here is to ignore that noise. Why did I pick Jan 2005 for the rental analysis? Well, as I said earlier, simply because it was the ONS's first year of statistics. There's been no cherry picking there. Rent can move miles forward before it was back to the arbitrary point in early 2005 and beyond that, frankly. So anyone crying wolf on affordability needs to see at least another 25% go on in the next 2 years. And a more likely figure is 10 to 12% over that period, in my view, before even being back to that arbitrary parity point. Hopefully you'll see why I picked the quote this week I did about data. The puzzle goes on, and I continue to do my best to solve it, or at least to make a coherent set of arguments. I'd love to get some comments and feedback as always. Please make sure you tune into the 9 AM live on YouTube, if you can, or watch it on repeat. If you don't already know about it, just make sure you search up Propenomix, check out the YouTube channel, and subscribe. Thanks very much and well done for getting this far, and of course, keep calm and carry on.